Greetings, everybody. Eric from RuleTheWasteland.com. Before we get into our random topics, as a reminder, I give away a bunch of awesome stuff every month to people who are members of the Patreon. And so we're going to be giving away four items right here at the beginning of this. First, the Vigilator. Welcome. We're going to be doing our Patreon giveaways. So if you guys want to take a look, I don't know how well you can see that, but we'll do a screen share right here if you guys want to zoom in on that. These are the various numbers for everyone, if you hadn't updated on which ones are your winning numbers. And I don't really have an easy way to remove the people after they are winning. So if someone wins a second, quote unquote, you only win one prize here. So if you win a second time, then you are going to, oh, let's do it again, because I don't really have a way to pull numbers out from the middle there. So that's how we'll do it. So first, what's up? Glad you guys can hear me. Mr. Landfill, always on time. Appreciate it. So we're going to do these picks really quick. So let's go to, I'm going to have that one open for me, my little spreadsheet here. And then for you guys, you should be able to get to see our little spinning wheel. So the first prize is going to be the 25 extra entries for March. So let's see what we got. We're going to spin. Where's my spin button? Oh, there we go. That's 108. Dun 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 dun. And we have 14. That will be number Ed M. Gets 25 extra entries for the one that's happening in the first thing of April. Congrats. So now we're going to go for the, real quick, the Invictus knife. And if Ed were to win again, I'll just do another spin until we have a new winner. I think Ed won last month, didn't he? 75. 75 is Dennis C. Congrats. Move choice. So the next one we are giving away, Kong case, and the people's chances are getting better because I'm removing. So this is for the Kong case, and if either Dennis C or Ed M win, I'll just do another spin. Kong case winner, chicken dinner, big bucks, no whammies. Who gets this one? 64. That is also Dennis C. So we'll do it again. This probably isn't the best way to do this, but I haven't figured out a better way yet to remove certain gaps in the numbers. 29. All right, that's a new one. That is Lincoln R. And then we have the last one, the Revo Nest knife. And then we'll get on to the, so if this is anyone other than Ed, Dennis, or Lincoln, do it. Might have to do a couple spins because my system is flawed here. But we'll see. Maybe we'll get lucky. 39. Who's that? All right, Niz. So we got the winners. Congratulations, everyone. And I'll be giving probably multiple prizes away at the first one in April for anyone who is already signed up or signs up during this month. And so just to reiterate, for you guys who just showed up, Ed M won the 25 extra entries that he'll have added on to the next month. The Invictus knife, Dennis C. The Kong case, we got Lincoln R. And the Revo We got Niz. So those guys, I'll be messaging you on Patreon. Just send me, make sure your address on there is what you want me to send it to. And that's cool. Congrats to everyone who got these cool knives. Yeah. So what should we talk about today? You guys start throwing in while I'm covering the few things that I do have to talk about. Start throwing in any suggestions you have for topics. What's up, HTP? Says we're gonna have digital wealth everywhere. Everything's gonna be fine. I've been assured. Yeah, kind of like a whole along the whole lines of we will own nothing and be happy. We'll have infinite money and not be able to buy anything. Kind of like water everywhere, but not a drop to drink. And this is funny because I have a friend who is in tech and he's very like optimistic about all the AI stuff and seems to think that it's going to be able to fix a lot of problems. And I'm like, man, I see nothing but continuous problems with a lot of this stuff. And it's not because there are no benefits to using it, or that there are no problems that are solved. Like there are a lot of problems that are solved by these things, by the internet. There's certain capabilities that these things give us. It's certain things are a lot more convenient and a lot easier. But what I'm focusing on is like the overall human experience better? Are our lives really enriched in like a meaningful sense just because certain things are easier or more convenient, or we have more capabilities? And for some of those things, the answer is definitely yes. Any sort of like medical technology almost always is mostly upside, with the exception of, certain things that have come out in the last, the way you would use them. And that's kind of my thoughts on most of this technologies. In and of itself, if I was king of America, none of this stuff would be a problem because it wouldn't be utilized in a way that would limit freedoms or limit the human experience. But just as we see with so many of these other, the way every single other technological tool has been used and is being used makes me very, very worried for how this AI and stuff is going to be implemented. And even the way it's implemented so far, I don't know how you can be too optimistic about it because we see that how its thought process and everything is put through filters and corrupted by the people who are building it. And they're like the worst people. We got like the Sam Altman type people who are obvious scumbags and degenerates and everything else, and totalitarians and people like Zuckerberg who use their access and control of this technology to commit actual disinformation. Not, but that's what they're supposedly trying to prevent, is literally quelling certain speech and certain ideas. So, and I only see this becoming more and more of a problem. Obviously, it's something that's incredibly problematic if we get into like digital wealth, like HTP was talking about, because anytime the government or any of these people have any element of control, they utilize it in a way that's not beneficial to people who care about freedom and individuality. And you can see that through the entire COVID, especially in places like Canada. And you can see how they utilize technology to go after January 6 people who in many cases, didn't even actually do anything illegal. How people like Zuckerberg and everything will control the flow of information on ideological lines. So there's just I really don't think that the benefits are going to outweigh that. And when the capabilities of this technology become so much more powerful, the things that they can do when they choose to use them in these evil ways are a lot worse, and makes it a lot harder to fight against, especially when there's a lot of convenience and potential, wealth type stuff that comes along with it. It's impossible to deny that a lot of this technology makes stuff easier or more convenient, but that doesn't mean that it's universally good. But it does mean that a lot of people are going to poo-poo the dangers and get all wrapped up into it and sacrifice a lot of their freedom, just to allow that stuff. Like there's a lot of things that have benefits that if you don't also take into account the negatives, you can get yourself into a lot of problems, like steroids or something. You know what I mean? Like no one says that steroids have zero positive benefit. No one would take them if that were the truth. But if you only focused on the positive benefits, like yes, you can grow a lot of muscle. And so if you just start blasting gear insane amounts, you will get those positive benefits. But there's a whole host of other negative benefits that potentially come along with it, especially if you're only focusing on the positive benefits and not doing things in a, regimented, responsible way, actually knowing what the potential downsides are, watching out for them, safeguarding against it, that sort of thing. And I think that's what I fear with this technology, especially when it's something so powerful. The first people to implement it will get a tremendous first mover advantage and will be able to lock in a lot of that control potentially uh, just by having the first examples of this, similar to like nuclear weapons. You know what I mean? It'll give them such an advantage that they'll be able to use it in a lot of horrible ways. Chris says, "What do you think they should do with the 5K that they're going to give every taxpayer?" I mean, first of all, I don't think that's going to happen. They just floated the idea. And I've mentioned before in the last live stream that the government does not have this money, even with the savings from Doge, which are substantial. It's awesome. They need to do a hell of a lot more. I don't care what anyone says. If anyone's sad about people losing their jobs and some of these people, not every single person was completely useless, but in the federal government, some people who were doing actual some legit work at least have been fired as well. But that's not the fault of the people who have to make these decisions now. It's the fault of everyone who let it get to this point, who authorized these crazy budgets, who hired these people to begin with, let the bureaucratic bloat take place. Now someone has to go in there and be the bad guy, and they're focusing on them, not the person who's making the fat kid run on the treadmill and saying, no, you can't eat anything tonight because you've eaten too much you've eaten the next 5 years worth of food already. That guy is the bad guy, not the parent who let the kid gorge for years and years and years and become incredibly unhealthy. It's the one who has to finally be the disciplinarian. But so first of all, the savings are great. I kind of went on a tangent there, but they haven't actually even begun to cut into the money that everything that we've saved is still well into the spending money that we don't have. We haven't even gotten back to parity yet. So there is no money that has been freed up. It will prevent us from going quite as further into debt, but we still are spending more than we make, even with all of these billions of dollars in savings. We have to, even just to get back to spending what we make, spending every penny and still not having any money. But just to get back to broke, we have to cut government spending by anywhere from 1.5 to 2+ trillion a year, which is insane amounts of money and is going to take some crazy cuts. And we haven't even begun to do that yet. So we haven't even got back to broke. There is no money to give out to anyone yet. So if they were to give money to people at this point, it was just continued stimulus deficit spending, which is bad. It's the same thing that started this problem to begin with. And it would be nothing more than stimulus. It would be a complete lie to say it was redistributing savings. It would just be more deficit spending as a stimulus. And it would be a bad idea. It would be extremely inflationary because of the money velocity of putting that directly into, I mean, it's all inflationary, but it's most inflationary when the money velocity is that high and it's just handed out to regular people who instantly flood it back into the economy. So the best thing you could do with that is to put it into something that had inflationary protection. Everything's going to continue. It would be just like the COVID money. So I would immediately buy gold, silver, ammo, land, any of the things that we've been talking about. So they should not do that. If they really felt the need to try and like do something along those lines, like I said in the last one, they should just make it a tax benefit. And if you aren't paying taxes, you don't get any of the benefits because you're already getting a huge benefit of tax money going your way. And if they wanted to say we've saved so much money that we can take 5 grand less from everybody, then so be it. And that would, be a stimulus in and of itself. People would have more money to spend. But it's certainly a bad idea. It's the exact same problem that caused this to just hand out 5K to everyone. So it would be stupid. HDP says Scottsdale CEO tweeted about deflation versus inflation policy today that everyone should contemplate. I'll check that out. I don't know if I follow him on what's his Twitter handle? Is it just under Scottsdale Mint? Try to find him, but Scottsdale Mint. Let's see what he says. I don't see anything on there, but yeah, that's their mint. But yeah, let me know if you have his Twitter handle. One elite smartphone with analog privacy switches immune to hacking for turning back on equals millions of products being made can simply be downloaded. I mean, there's a lot of stuff I would like to see them make that goes to what I was saying that can use all this technology without all too much of the negative downsides. And I'm trying to figure more of that. And if I was somehow got um, a bunch of money, that's definitely something I would do is create a company that made like something like vehicles and phones, for example, or something that could be made with the technology that we have. They should be cheaper, like TVs. It should be cheaper and more efficient and more effective than the cars and stuff and phones and everything that we had when I was growing up. And you can leave out a lot of that tracking, like all the like if you go buy a 2018, 2020, or not even that, what year is it, 2025? If you buy anything pretty much after 2020, certainly the 24s, 25s, there's going to be all sorts of electronics and sensors and some things are even have to be subscription based, like we heard so much about the heated seats that you have to pay for these companies. Like that's so much of that is such nonsense. And a lot of us don't need anything technologically. Even the people who are not super old school appreciative, like maybe I am. Um, Certainly the technological level of like a 2015 or a 2012 car is usually fine. Maybe add in one or two of the perks, but like you don't have to go back to having like no not power windows. You could make an amazing car with a lot of that stuff and make it super cheap and just getting rid of a bunch of the you don't need all these sensors everywhere, computer controlled everything. You could take engines that already existed and you don't have to have cars that cut off, and cut back on some of the cylinders and all this other crazy shit that they have. Um, Electronic fobs instead of keys. Like you could really make some really cheap cars, but they literally make that impossible on purpose because of safety and efficiency regulations that it's actually illegal a lot of times to make these products. I don't know if that's necessarily the case with phones. You could certainly do some smartphones that didn't allow a lot of that bullshit, but yeah. Okay, Sid, I just sent you on Twitter. See what he says here. Aha. Yes. So this is the guy from Scottsdale, Josh Philip Fair. Says deflation is to rich people what inflation is to everyone else. Yeah, I mean that really makes sense because if you think about it, and I always talk about this, like wealth really is first order wealth, the resources, the earth's scarce resources, and the people who are actually wealthy are the ones who control that some way or another. When you go back down the chain of money derivatives and all these abstractions, you get to all the wealth that's owned by, and it's usually by all these same people. Like we talk about BlackRock buying up all the residential real estate. Like they play around with all the financial instruments too, but they're the ones that own all this stuff. And that these are the people who benefit from, or at least aren't hurt as much by inflation. And for the average person who doesn't own everything, deflation just means lowered prices, and that's a good thing. For if you're the person who actually owns everything, deflation means lower prices, which means the value of your stuff is going down. You're not making money from a job, someone paying you necessarily to do something. You're making money because of all these assets that you own, which we should all strive to be in that position. It's easier said than done, but that's why we should focus on things like gold and silver and land and productive capacity and stuff and not just on W-2 income if you can because of these reasons. So yeah, absolutely. That's why you see the powers that be like the Federal Reserve are dedicated to not keeping no inflation or disinflation, but just they're actively committed openly. Their stated goal is 2% inflation. They're saying we want a certain amount of inflation, and that's why. And they've even said, because they said, well, we have all these years that we're way over 2%, and your target is supposedly 2%. So are you going to have some years where you purposely go below that to balance it out? And they're like, and they said no. He openly said no, we're never going to do less than 2%. We want, so basically they're always saying we want at least 2% inflation, and they're okay with more than that. They'll sit there, obviously not going to do anything crazy to stop it from being 8, 9, 10% inflation because that's what we have, but they'll do plenty to stop there from being even 1% inflation, let alone actual deflation because of, like HCP was saying, they're the ones with all the assets. They don't mind a little bit of inflation. Time to pull out of NATO and reduce ties with London and EU. Very obviously the case. We have been the basically the milking cow for the European stupid policies for too long. And this isn't a negative to Europeans, but that they decide that this stuff is important, they need to do it themselves. Hopefully, they will not put their citizens in that position to where they decide to fight with Russia. I still think that they are kind of assuming that they can just drag us into it. But the idea that Putin has any designs to like take over Europe is so stupid. I don't believe that at all for a second. That doesn't mean that he wouldn't start kicking ass if he thought that that's what needed to be done. But I don't buy that he is an straight up evil person or some kind of Hitler. He's a human being who's imperfect, will probably make some good decisions, probably make some bad decisions, maybe motivated by selfish reasons, of course, like a lot of other humans, but I don't necessarily. It's so funny to watch people act like the Russians are such an evil force and then just ignore everything and anything that the US government and the CIA and everything else has done over the years. And I'm not even trying to say that the US is worse per se, just the same thing that it's humans. They're going to be doing selfish, self-serving things, doing some things that could be considered evil, some things that could be beneficial, but they just hand wave away all the same sort of things when we do it or when Israel does it. But when it's Russia doing the exact same behaviors that all these other countries do, somehow they're this mega force for evil that just has to be snuffed out because reasons, and they're going to take over the world. And methinks the ladies does protest too much, and it's a lot of projection on the part of all these countries knowing what they want to do. Mr. Quick says if there's only one smartphone to make to get all those other products, and all your markets will have to focus on needs because masses got all that other stuff. I'm not sure I know what you're saying. If there was only one smartphone to make, you mean if it had all the features that you didn't have to do? Ahmed says, I believe we'll do away with NATO's approval since Russia is weak enough to face by itself. Macron also convinced the UK to help. I don't think that Russia is weak enough to be faced by. They someone pointed out very like incredulously on Twitter. I wish I still had kept this because it was a huge insight into the way that these people think. Is they were like, how is like the whole world like NATO and Ukraine and all these European countries basically fighting together to support, at least financially, to support Ukraine, it all struggling with Russia. They only have a GDP of like $50 billion or something. That's nothing. And it's just their mindset of big number go up. That means it's better when GDP includes just all economic activity, including government spending. So when you have this park ranger whose job it is to go find the trans wallabies or whatever, and whatever the hell they're doing and all these other USAID funds, like that's going to increase GDP, all this government spending, whereas that entire 50 billion that Russia's GDP is, I don't know exactly what it is, I'm just throwing a number out there, is focused on military capacity, production. They have a huge amount of natural resources in the country as well. They are going to be able to punch outside of their weight class in terms of resilience and everything else because it's not about a number on a paper. That's an abstraction. Like I pointed out before, I have a lot of people that I know, in fact, most people that I know have a lot more on paper or in a lot better position than me, like financially. But and so their GDP is much higher. But in any sort of realistic scenario of disruption or SHTF, if the power goes out, the lights go out, the grocery stores shut down, if the internet goes out, they will be in shitstorm in hours. A lot of cases, let alone days, where I could potentially not have to leave my house for years. So that's the same thing we're seeing with Russia and all these countries is they're flabbergasted at how you can get so much have so much difficulty because we're so much wealthier and more powerful, and it's all fugazi for the most part. And to be sure, the U.S. does have a considerable amount of military might too, but the point stands that it's not about the numbers on paper always. It's about the Earth's real resources, about productive capacity, and that's the things that they're focusing on. And certainly having a more cohesive nation than the U.S. and a lot of European nations are struggling with problems from mass immigration and stuff that make people not care about the same things. Russia doesn't have that problem as much. That exists to some extent in most modern countries, but it's certainly not as bad there, and that's why we haven't seen. There were all these stupid predictions about how there were going to be riots in Russia and everyone is against it and they were going to overturn Putin, and that's just not the case. None of that. None of those predictions that everyone had. I came out and said the exact. I was reading an article yesterday. about how people were just admitting what I said 2 years ago about how this all comes down to manpower. Is that eventually Russia is going to win the war of attrition? Doesn't matter what Ukraine does, doesn't matter how many billions of dollars we give them, they are eventually going to run out of people. And then it doesn't matter if they have $100 trillion, they won't have any soldiers left. And then that's what's going to tell the tale. And that's what we're seeing happen right now. And that's why you see Keir Starmer and other people claiming that they're going to put British troops on the ground, which would be an absolutely disastrously, and I think, in my opinion, treasonous decision on their part to waste the lives of their countrymen in for this. But they're claiming they're going to do that, and I think that's still part of a ploy to try and drag the U.S. in, is to have NATO troops get blown up there to some capacity. So that's another reason why I agree with the people who are saying we should just leave NATO and be like, Article 5, Article 6, Article Schmitz, whatever, it's your business. And Article 5 doesn't apply to a situation like that anyway, because they would be willingly entering an existing conflict. But the point stands that, like, if you're like, it's just not even an issue anymore, have fun, stop wasting our money. I remember 5-digit phone numbers. I don't remember that much. How long do you think we postponed World War III since Trump is in? I mean, I think it depends. It really depends. I think it's possible. It's possible we could have prevented it. That's how big of a change it is. It's still possible that things could go wrong, specifically when you factor in Iran and Israel, and the US is just total subservience to Israel is the only real way to put it, but certainly caring about Israel way, way too much. And but Russia China part, like that we'll see what happens in the next 6 months. But so far, directionally, it's a huge improvement. Just willing to look at the position of the Ukraine realistically, tell Zelensky the truth, which was seen as bullying, simply being honest with him, saying he's being bullied. That's what the smartphone thing is about, reducing the billions of tons in waste America has because it sends resources and money and protection to every nation that builds our stuff now. Yeah, exactly. And that's why Russia and China and everything will be in a better position in a lot of these situations, is because even with all their problems, and there's are no countries on the planet that don't have any problems right now, because the system is just so far removed from what's real and true and good, that but the people who have a better base in reality in mining, manufacturing, production are always going to be better suited. Just like I talked about my analogy with me and friends who have a bunch of money. When things get crazy and the system breaks, the points you have in that system, which is all really money is these days, when you're talking about like not real money like gold and silver, but wealth, most people's wealth is just points in the video game. And when the video game shuts down, people are gonna be like, but I had 1 billion points on there. And they'll be like, well, I'm eating tonight. You can go talk about your points while you sit in the dark with no food to eat. Because I have electricity, I have food, I might not have points, but points aren't going to serve you well when the game changes. And I don't hope for that. I hope we can manage this decline, have a soft landing, so to speak. And I'm honestly more hopeful ever than I have been that we will be able to do some version of that and avoid a complete collapse, because of even the references to like gold and shutting down or auditing or getting away from the Fed and all that stuff means they're at least looking at in the right directions. Now, whether they'll do the right thing, I'm still pretty dubious on. I tend to think that they're still going to go the route of like some kind of digital dollar or new dollar, but they at least maybe will have it be commodity back. But yeah, I mean, I really don't think we're going to get in a position where freedom and individuality will be enhanced over the next 20 years, but we might avoid the worst case scenarios. That's what I'm hopeful for. Republic credits will do fine. Yeah, exactly. Credits. It's not going to work on us. Uh, What do you think the economic impact of the U.S. pulling out of NATO is? My question would be always, for whom? Look to who would benefit, man. It would be a huge benefit for us because we supply what, 17, 20% of NATO's budget or something like that. So that would be a huge cost savings right there. And if we were smart, we would use that to simultaneously pull out from a lot of these bases and locations all around the world, which would allow us to save a huge amount of military spending. which those are the things that, I mean, the big one that we have to fix to really close the budget gap is Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. Obviously, it's a lot easier to cut defense spending, and I think it would not be that difficult, and it would be pretty straightforward to cut the defense spending by at least 30%, probably closer to 50%, without changing much domestically, just closing some of the, not having so many locations worldwide. Especially now that the whole like carrier group hegemony is just not the way that war is going to be fought anymore. It's going to be all drones and electronic warfare and certain places back to artillery and troops and tanks, which is what we've learned from Ukraine, that we just don't need to have the same set of systems of like bases everywhere. And certainly shouldn't have bases everywhere. But even if we did that and cut defense spending by 50%, I mean, the entire defense budget is only like 50% of the current defense budget of like 800 billion or whatever it is still only half of Social Security alone is like 1.5, 1.6 trillion dollars a year in spending. Medicare, Medicaid is like equal to the Department of Defense, stuff like that. So we're talking about this insane amounts of money going to these things. So it's going to have to be fixed, and everyone is going to cry about it. But there's only two ways that this is going to end. It ends with us making the tough decisions and making tough cuts and changing the system, and some people getting pissed off, or just letting it run until it collapses and everyone gets pissed off. Mr. Quick says the Bible verse is Zechariah 14:12. Plagues of Babylon, or Google the song Plagues of Babylon, key and lyrics, their eyes will melt in their sockets. Yeah. SBQR says wealth should be measured in direct access or possession of vital resources. Everything else is irrelevant in terms of material wealth. Exactly. Because when it comes down to it, and I've used this analogy before, if you have a planet with zero financial system but all the resources, or a planet with no financial resources, like a desert Arrakis or whatever, nothing there, and infinite amounts of, like, let's say dollars, it's irrelevant. Everyone still just dies. At some point, you have to have water. At some point, you have to have oxygen. At some point, you have to have food and materials, rare earth metals, oil, whatever, all these different types of things that we need to build that. Anything else, any sort of financial instrument, whether that's a stock, whether that's a derivative, whether that's physical paper money, whether that is mortgages and loans, none of it is real wealth. It's all just a representation of it. And at some point, for anybody to actually do anything, flip a light switch, build the house that has the light switch, move people, transmit an idea, fuel your body, repair it, take medicine, all of that stuff is what the actual wealth is. And any of those other things are just representations of it. And we've gotten really good over the years at getting fancy with our representations and using, like I said, points. It's video game points. And we've gotten really good at racking up the points. And people are still foolish enough to give us real stuff for points. But that is eventually going to change. And you better have the real stuff. Michael says U.S. represents 70% of NATO budget. It true, but that's a kind of a deceptive way of presenting it, because that is, of all the military spending of NATO countries, we spend 70% of that, but that includes our entire defense budget. We're not spending all that money on NATO. That's at least how I understand it. So we don't, like, of the NATO spending, we don't give them 70% of it. I think we give them like 20% of it. Still huge, obviously. They're not doing anything without us. And a whole bunch of that, obviously, of everything that all these other NATO countries do is dependent on the fact that we spend 800 billion on our own military and that we have them standing behind everybody, like Andre the Giant in those old wrestling photos. How much of what they do would just get laughed away or whatever if it wasn't for us doing what we do and just simply being there to big brother everybody. But yeah, we don't literally give NATO all that money. It's money that we're spending on our own military, but then that we are NATO effectively because of that, because we have such a huge military, and because our military alone is 70% of like all the military spending of NATO countries combined, then that is meaningful. And for us to leaves them, in not a good position to do all the stupid stuff that they want to do. So that's a righteous cactus lamp. I agree. It's pretty cool. I like this, the glowing cactus. I'm a little bit. I have some favoritism to my nuke lamp though. Jen says, what about the folks who paid Social Security tax at their entire working career? And this is honestly, this is a big deal because they will rightly say, like, this is what I'll take it's a problem. And the short answer is some of them are going to get fucked. It's a Ponzi scheme. And some of these people will have promises made to them that will be broken. And like I said, that is not a good thing. But you can't take it out on the people who have to fix the problem. I mean, if the choice is we can do that, we can make some hard decisions that are going to fuck some people, or we can sit back and wait until everyone gets fucked because the whole system explodes and people literally die in the street. But there are a lot of people who were promised certain things. It was stupid promises. It was a scam. That it was something that they shouldn't have been promised to have a defined benefit plan based on like outdated uh, like terms of how much people spend in retirement, how long they live, how much medical care costs. All they're like, we will give you X amount of dollars. And the system is obviously broken. It was set up very poorly. It was set up myopically, and it has to be changed now. And some people are not going to get what they were promised because of that, and that's wrong. But you can't deny reality and say, "Fuck it, I'm just going to get it anyway." It's not there. You know what I mean? If you were to mow someone's lawn because they promised you a piece of half of a pie. Like, I'll give you half a pie if you mow my lawn. So you mowed their lawn, and then you figured out that they did that to everybody too, like four people, and they come in and there's four people and one pie. The same question is I could ask you. What about the folks who did what they paid in, they mowed the lawn? What happens to them? What do you think happens to them? Unless you can conjure up some pie out of thin air, someone's getting fucked. And the people who made those promises foolishly or maliciously, whatever the case may be, there should be a lot of anger towards them and there should be some punishment. And they certainly shouldn't be allowed in power anymore. But the problem that I see is a lot of these people, and they're mostly boomers because that's who is drawing Social Security now, is boomers and older, is they act like because they were promised it, they're not going to make any concessions. Like, I earned this, and that way I'm getting it. We're never going to make any changes, and I'd rather see the country burn down around me than. And it's like, well, one way or another, a lot of us are going to get fucked by Social Security. And that's just the way it is. Like I said, there is no pie. You're all promised pie, and it's not there. So, what do you think is going to happen? What is your recommendation for this? And their recommendation is always, well, I should get what I was promised, and we should make those cuts elsewhere. And be like, okay, maybe that's doable. Maybe we could cut the entire rest of federal spending just to placate the Social Security promises that were made foolishly. But it's still a Ponzi scheme. It still has to be fixed, and or it's going to blow up. So then who gets screwed? Then there's still I paid into Social Security too. Lots of people slightly older than me, younger than me, we're being made the same promises right now, and they're promises that can't be kept. So, like, what about the folks who paid Social Security tax their entire working career? They're going to get fucked. That's my answer. They paid for it. Yeah, and like I said, they paid for it. They're owed it. You're right. So it's like if someone robs you and then you go to their house and they're a meth head and they spent it all on drugs, and I say they don't have any money, and you say bullshit, they stole it from me. You're like, yeah, they did. You're right. They're the bad guy. You didn't do anything wrong. Now what? How are you going to get your money back? You're going to have the court say they owe me? Sure. Okay. It's not there. So they did pay for it. What does that change? You're going to conjure money out of thin air because of righteous anger? It's gone. There is no money. The government wasted it. They fucked you. They fucked us all. And all I see is boomers crossing there and going, no, 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 no. I've earned it. So we're not going to make any change. Like, we are, when you wake up in these situations, you have to deal with reality. It doesn't mean that it's right. I'm not excusing it. I'm not saying that these people are good or that they shouldn't be punished if that's possible. I'm saying this is where we're at now. The money is not there. They stole it from you, basically. They stole it from me. They made promises that they can't keep, whether that is from stupidity or outright malice, probably a combination of both, as with most of these things. And that's where we're at now. Is the people who paid for their entire working career are going to get fucked, just like the rest of us. But we can try to deal with reality in a way that prevents a complete collapse. And when you realize that the system is broken, just refusing to change it because you were screwed criminally, like the rest of us, isn't going to fix the problem. It's going to make it worse. And then we could get in a position where you don't get anything and nobody gets anything, or the country just completely collapses. And I think the problem that Jen and others have is, like I said, they interpret what I'm saying as saying that you're wrong or that you didn't earn it or that you don't deserve it. I'm saying that that's irrelevant because we are in this position that we were lied to, we were stolen from, etc. But now we're in a position where we're not going to get what we were promised, what we earned. Just like if you could do any job and you would absolutely be owed the money that you worked for, or if you paid someone for a product and they don't have it because they lied to you or they were a cheat or whatever, you would say, bullshit, I paid for that. No one's saying you didn't pay for it. You're saying you got fucked, that you got robbed. And you can't just because you were robbed doesn't mean that we can conjure it out of thin air to make restitution. That's not the way things work in the real world. There's always just a government fund there that can reimburse people infinitely for if they get screwed. That's what's caused this problem to begin with, is that we got criminally screwed over. Yeah, and it's gone. It's all gone. At minimum, Social Security should be opt-in. I mean, obviously, that's probably the way they'll do it in the future. It should be, but the main problem with it, like I said, is it's defined benefits, and you can never have a system that there is no potential, or that the cap, I guess, on the what you could get could always be higher than the amount that you put in. You know what I mean? Like, and especially as we get forward technologically, people could live longer. Like, it should, based on what you get out, should be based on what you put in. Um, and I think it should be opt-in. I definitely think that. And I also think it should be more like a 401k or something like that, that if they are going to do it. But the problem is that people don't want that. People want to think that there is a safety net there, and the idea that you could outlive your Social Security kind of defeats the whole purpose in their mind. Because the whole purpose for most people is that we have this thing there that prevents old people from just running out of money and dying. And if you cap the amount of money that they could get for any reason, then you're not solving that problem in their mind. And the obvious answer is that you can't actually solve that problem, and unless you buy into the from each according to his ability to each according to his need Marxist bullshit. And the problem with that is that needs are potentially uncapped, while ability to produce is not necessarily going to line up and rarely does, especially when you make the system such that people can kind of choose to pull more out than they put in. And I'm not talking about Social Security with that. I'm talking about all the other social programs or whatever. But like if someone worked at McDonald's their whole career and put in a certain amount of money, they might still live in 50 years or whatever and need more money than they ever put in. So what's the fix for that? You know what I mean? You can't have a system that you can just pull out an technically unlimited amount of money. You have to make sure there's a way that the average contribution is more than the average withdrawal. There's a lot of different ways to do that, but that's the bottom line, is that the amount coming out has to be less than the amount going in. And that's not what's happening. It's a literal Ponzi scheme, and that the early adopters are taking a lot more out of the system than the people who are putting in money now. Jen says, remove Social Security numbers from the general budget, take money from Doge and fund. What money? There is no money. Doge doesn't have any money. Like I said, we haven't even closed the gap between spending money we don't have to just being broke and spending every penny that we have. Doge has not created any money. They haven't even yet got us anywhere near the point that we are actually have the money that we're spending. They're doing a great job cutting a bunch of superfluous bullshit, but there is no money. What money are you talking about? You said take money from Doge. Doge does not have any money. What money are you talking about? Wonder if they will put SS into Bitcoin, rather have invested into PMs. Yeah, and I think part of it will just be that you'll have to accept, or humans, all of us have to accept that there is no such thing as an ironclad safety net. That there's always a chance, whether that's FDIC insurance or any of these other things, you have to realize that people have to take some responsibility, and the people who live their lives irresponsibly, or in some cases just extremely unlucky, will get put in a position where they have bad things happen because you can't just take infinite amounts of money from everyone else to pour into certain black holes. Then see, look, then phase it out, but we have to honor this commitment. You can't. It's a commitment that was made unrealistically. I could commit to helping someone bench press 600 pounds, and it could put them in a really bad spot because I promised I can do it, but it's a commitment that cannot be honored. And you're only saying that because it's a commitment that was made to you. There's a lot of other commitments that are made by the government to a lot of people for a lot of different things that are not going to be made. And that's bullshit. It shouldn't be that way, but it is. And we have to deal with that realistically and deal with reality and realize it and not just put the ones that help us. You're just like these federal employees who are like, yeah, I realize we have to cut the federal budget, but it shouldn't be my job that we cut. Doge has saved over 100 billion to date. Quit funding other nations. I 100% agree with quit funding other nations. That should absolutely stop. They have saved that, but that 100 billion is money that we would have spent that we didn't even have. It's not money sitting there. It just stopped us from going even further, $100 billion further in debt. And $100 billion is a joke when it comes to the Social Security shortfalls. The Social Security is spending like $1.5 trillion a year. And the bottom line is, and I know you don't want to hear this, and you're obviously having trouble dealing with it, but a lot of people, most people, especially the people who are on the cusp of retirement or haven't yet retired, are just not going to get what they were promised. And that's not a good thing. It's not right. It's not my fault, and it's certainly not your fault, but you were made bullshit promises that they can't back up. And that's just the bottom line. And that's shitty. And that's why we are trying to prevent all these things from happening with the government making poor decisions that are not based on reality, they're not based on actual wealth, that are based on the points in the video game system. Is they thought we'd have infinite points, we could always just increase the amount of production or GDP, and it would just fix these problems, and that's not the case. We could snag and force Nancy Pelosi to do an OnlyFans. We'll split the profits. I don't know how much profits. She does have some surprisingly big cans, but I don't know if anyone's paying to see that. It's like 85 years old. Yeah, exactly. I mean, they'd have to maybe get there's a few other people on there that might be able to make a few bucks, but I don't think Pelosi's one of them. They just need to get her on the stock trading team or whatever. She seems to be quite an expert at that, but that's all because of insider trading. For those of you who don't know, she's a horrendous insider trading. But lucky for her, they've made a lot of rules where it's not illegal for them to do it. Like literally, it's not illegal for Congress to do insider trading, and it is for you and me to do it. It's bullshit. War talk, Hawk Tua, War Hawk Tua. That's funny. That chick did like a crypto rug pull too. It's pretty hilarious. 8 years till I'm 65. I've known for years I will never see Social Security. That's actually fairly close. I'd be surprised if you didn't get anything. It'll just be in inflated dollars that won't buy you much. Um, and that's probably one way that they'll kind of weasel out of this is they'll just kind of have to phase out real cost of living adjustments so that you might even get the amount of money that you're like promised, but it just won't be able to buy anything with it. Like, oh, you'll get your $1,100, but by that time a gallon of gas will be $100 or something like that, or they'll switch to a new system and be like, oh, well, these aren't dollars anymore. So now, yeah. But like I said, the bottom line is people can make all sorts of promises, and we can get into all sorts of deals that we paid into it. You know, a lot of people could be like, bullshit. I paid, what was that guy's name? Who did the investment scheme? Why am I blanking right now? Madoff. All those people could have correctly claimed, like, hey, I gave this guy my money. I paid into this, and this was the deal. What would you tell them? We can get Doge money now that will be added to the debt and responsibly shifted to future generations. I'll be dead, so I'm for getting the money now. Well, yeah, like I said though, those like these are savings. And a lot of people don't even realize this, but a lot of times the government would say that they'll do tricks like that. And that's not necessarily what Doge is doing, but they'll say like, "Oh, we saved money because they didn't spend it." So they'll say, "Well, we were planning on spending $1 trillion on this cause over the next 10 years, and we're actually only going to spend 800 million. So we saved $200 billion, even though the entire 800 billion is money that we don't even have, and we're deficit spending to get even that. They'll say that we actually saved money, even though every year we're going more and more into debt. That's how they track it. It's bullshit. And like I said, Doge has not created or found any money. They have just eliminated outgoing expenditures by like 100 billion or something, which is an insane amount of money. It's an absolute disgrace to our country that those amounts of money are almost meaningless in the grand scheme of things, but certainly necessary. But it isn't money that they've found or created. It's just money that they've stopped from continuing to charge to the credit card. Um, so that money doesn't exist. It never did. We were going to spend it even though we didn't have it by going even further and further into debt. Right. All they're doing is theoretically slowing inflation. And we know that, like I said, they haven't even gotten close to where we're just broke and just spending every penny the government brings in. And even if they got to there, which is a Herculean effort in and of itself, we still have the 36 trillion that's sitting there getting bigger every year because of interest on it that is now going up because we have to roll over these bonds at higher interest rates. So even if Doge and Elon Musk and Trump just do yeoman's work in slashing every bit of bullshit that they can imagine, and we're like, we are now at parity. We have a balanced budget. That doesn't eliminate the debt. We would still be going further and further and further into debt every year. We are in an almost impossible position without doing insanely draconian cuts, which is why, like, I'm sorry, you are not going to get the Social Security benefits that you're promised over at least the purchasing power over the next so many years. A lot of us are not going to get things that we were promised. Infrastructural stuff that should have been done isn't going to happen. Like of these federal employees that are all getting fired now, they're not all deadbeats. Sure, a lot of them are, but these are a lot of normal people doing just regular jobs too that are getting fired because of it. And it's because we've been put in this position that has to happen. That one way or another, the ball that you threw up comes back down. And the people who are just like if you had your own household spending, you can slash everything, sell your cars, and ride a bike to work and maybe keep your house, or you can just put your finger in your ear and say, I don't want to hear it. I'm not willing to walk to work, and then wait till it blows up in your house and car get repoed, and then you're sleeping on the street. And those are the alternatives, basically metaphorically speaking, that we're facing as a country. Doge is canceling old subscriptions. Yeah, a lot of old subscriptions. We will all soon be a Nigerian prince. Yeah, we need those billions of dollars. So I don't have the prizes here that I was going to show you for the next one. So I'll just let you know on the next live stream what the prizes are for March. But it'll be some cool stuff. Pretty sure it's some knives again. But we got, for those of you who missed the first part of this, we had 4 winners this month. So obviously your chances are extremely good. I'll have at least 2 prizes for next month. And so jump on that Patreon. At this point, I'm spending as much to ship this stuff out to you guys as I'm getting in. So it's just for the fun of it to be able to help some of you guys out, give you some cool prizes. So appreciate you guys tuning in, and stay frosty. Try to stack real wealth, whether that's gold and silver, whether that's other metals, whether that's land, especially productive land, but anything that's a real thing. That's how we beat this. Be our own central banks. So what is the answer? Jen says. I think, like I said, the answer is there's a certain amount of contraction that has to happen and is going to be painful. And the answer is to do it before it all collapses. Like I said, as the analogy of if we were a household and the same thing was happening, we have to do the really tough things. Like we have to sell our cars and start walking to work and try to keep the house. We have to cancel all our subscriptions. We have to eat rice and beans. So we have to do the government equivalent of that. And honestly, I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think that we're going to ever have the political will, because it isn't just up like all these things like Social Security, like all these government expenditures. The most of what we're spending is stuff like that that's going directly to people. And I don't think we're going to have the political ability because you have to get so many people to agree to be able to cut those things. And everyone who is losing them is just going to vote in the next election for whoever is saying, don't worry, we're not going to take that. That I don't think we're going to be able to do it. And I think the answer is that we are going to have somewhat of a collapse where these things just can't happen and just it stops suddenly instead of being scaled back in a regimented way, instead of saying like, well, some people have to just not get everything that they're promised in Social Security or food stamps or any of these other things. It's just all going to stop at once and no one will get anything and it'll be really, really shitty for a while. I think that's what's going to happen. Because the answer is just to cut it back enough, no matter how painful it is, to where we are at the very least not spending more than we make. And then at that point, you have to cut a little bit more, enough to at least eliminate the debt from growing. But that's not going to happen. It's just not. So I hope we can enshrine enough things and protect them that the economy doesn't completely collapse, but I think we're going to see a lot of like major contraction in these things. So yeah, I think it's, as Michael says, I think it's going to get really ugly. And I think the people who are going to be able to weather it are the people who have the real things that you actually need, like food, like shelter, like power generation capabilities, like medicine, and the ability to buy those with gold and silver and ammo and whatever else you can is valuable, and not the people who have just racked up points in this game. But thanks for watching, guys. I will see you soon, and keep checking back for more stuff.